My favorite drink is all the way beyond 10 of 102.
92? 92? Yeah, he's 91. You see me at 3 by what? Really? I knew I was going to have to tell you to. I'm the Met guy. I'm the Mets guy. But I saw you in Chamber of Library a couple years ago. I gave you all your questions. I'm giving them all these questions. I can. No. The Mets don't? No, I'm from Elizabeth, New Jersey. Hey, you want to go back that old? The Resolutes. One just came out. Yeah. Oh yeah, I downloaded that. I don't miss any of those. Good to see you. Make sure you got it. Volunteer, yeah.
Stop. Long stuff.
Before I get there, about 6
I was actually.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today?
Wonderful.
Excellent. You can have all the refreshments you want.
Thank you.
My name is Danny White, and I'm so honored to be here today to be a part of this, the Arizona's Negro League Baseball Centennial Celebration. Yes, we can't clap for that. And while my primary sports in high school, college, and post-college was football, basketball, and other things, I've always admired individuals who played America's favorite pastime. And historically, individuals were playing in different areas and opportunities, and long before Branch Rickey of the old Brooklyn Dodgers provided the opportunity for number 42, Jackie Robinson, to break the color barrier, there were individuals all across this country and right here in Arizona as well, demonstrating those same skills and doing as much. And so while the world was fascinated with the Babe Ruths and the Pee Wee Reeses and a number of other individuals, there was an individual by the name of Josh Gibson. There was Buck O'Neill. there was a number of individuals, and there was the home run hitter right here in the Phoenix area who attended this school, sitting right back there, who did an excellent job. Good to see you. Good to see you. And so many others, and so many others. So we're going to introduce some individuals who were responsible for coordinating this. Mr. Bill Staples Jr., baseball historian, author. Bill is a member of the Society for American Baseball Research from Chandler, Arizona, with a passion for researching and telling the untold stories of the international pastime. His areas of expertise include Japanese American and Negro League baseball history as a context for exploring the themes of civil rights, cross-cultural relations, and globalization. He is also a board member for both the NISI Baseball Research Project and the Japanese American Citizens League Arizona chapter, chairman of the SABRA Asian Baseball Committee, and research contributor to the Negro League's Baseball Museum in Kansas City. He is the author of Kenichi Zinamura, Japanese American baseball pioneer and co-author of Gentle Black Giants, A History of Negro Leagues in Japan. His other works are listed on his website, zinamura.com. Also very happy to have with us Mr. Charlie Basilero, baseball historian, author, and a former 20-year resident of Arizona. So that means you moved away?
I live in Baltimore now.
Well, I'm a Raven fan, so it's okay with me. Everybody else may have problems with you today. Charlie spent his formative years, as a journalist watching Cactus League spring training baseball. Since moving to Baltimore 14 years ago, he makes an annual pilgrimage here, if you will, to Arizona, writing baseball travel stories for a wide variety of publications. His writings on spring training baseball has appeared in the Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, and Sun Times, and annually in Airline, somebody agree with it over here, in-flight magazines. During the past 2 decades, he has been a constant contributor to Cactus League team programs. He is the author of 3 books, including a biography of Hammering Hank Aaron, and a young writer's bibliography of Manny Ramirez, as well as a limited edition historical volume commissioned by the United States Department of Commerce called Baseball of America. Okay, and also Mr. Byron Brown. Mr. Byron Brown here.
You know, Byron hasn't arrived yet. I'm
Okay.
texting him, but let's go ahead and introduce him. And if not, we have plenty of baseball historians here who are going to help fill in that gap, should there be one.
Okay. All right. Just a little bit on Mr. Byron Brown, former Major League Baseball player. Byron, former League Baseball outfielder who played in Major League Baseball for the Chicago Cubs, Houston Astros, St. Louis Cardinals, and Philadelphia Phillies between 1965 and 1972. He was drafted by the Cubs in '63, where he would later have the honor to play under the guidance of the first African-American coach in Major League history. And who would that be? Not over here. Who over here? Who can tell us? Cookies are on the line. Oatmeal raisin cookies on the line. Buck O'Neil. Yes, the legendary Buck O'Neil. In October 1969, Byron was traded to the Phillies along with Kirk Flood, Tim McCarver, and Joe Horner for Dick Allen, Cookie Rojas, and Jerry Johnson. He played the rest of his Major League career for Philadelphia. Today, Byron is a snowbird who splits his time between Iowa, and Arizona, and is active in community outreach and youth training programs as a member of the Arizona Major League Alumni Association. So, between those 3 distinguished gentlemen and every one of you that are present, baseball enthusiasts, I'm sure we are all in tune to be finally indulged with a number of artifacts and bits of history that will impress us all. So at this time, please welcome Mr. Bill Staples Jr. to have some comments.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Directly right in the microphone? It's good and loud? All right. So I just got a text from Byron Brown. Apparently he's still active with the Chicago Cubs organization.
He was pulled away to an emergency game situation at Sloan Field. He's going to see if he can join us within the next hour or so. So cross your fingers. But until then, Charlie and I will share lots of great information with you. Okay? All right. Well, first of all, thank you, friends, family, and fellow baseball fans. Great to have you here today. Thanks for coming out and taking time out of your day to partake in this wonderful celebration. I want to thank our sponsors for this event. Princess Crump, where's Princess? Can you raise your hand? Is she with us? So Princess just stepped away. The Princess is the president of the George Washington Carver Museum. A few people have asked me who are not familiar with this building, why is it the George Washington Carver Museum? George Washington Carver was not a resident of Phoenix. He did not live in Phoenix. This was the segregated high school during the 30s and 40s. And when George Washington Carver passed away in 1943, the school renamed itself after George Washington Carver. But there is a small exhibit in room L, I believe, to learn more about George Washington Carver. So I just wanted to share that for those who might be wondering. I also want to thank the Japanese American Citizens League and the Nisei Baseball Research Project. I'll share in my presentation this morning the intersection between Japanese American baseball and Negro leagues. It's really fascinating, and they felt it was important to be a part of this Centennial celebration as well. And my contacts over at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and in the Sabre community, they've been very supportive as well. And the Chandler Museum, they originally wanted to host this event, but after we realized that there were other partners who could wanted to get involved, they're helping us from a promotional standpoint. So I wanted to share that. I also want to thank this gentleman right here for this great forum. Anybody know who this is? Satchel Paige. So he's the logo for our Centennial. And I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I asked her as I was putting this presentation together, do you know who this is with the logo only? She said, is that Jackie Chan? I said, no, but pretty close. So that's the great Satchel Paige. But I need to give some credit to my daughter. We've trained her quite a bit in terms of educating her about the importance of the Negro Leagues. Almost to a point when she was about 8 years old, she said, now let me get this straight. So if you're a good baseball player, you can make it to the minor leagues. And if you're really good, you make it to the major leagues. And if you're really, really good, you get to play in the Negro Leagues. And I said, yes, that's exactly it. So that was her understanding of Negro Leagues history as a young child. All right. But we are here today to celebrate the efforts of Rube Foster, the father of Negro League baseball, founded the Negro National League in 1920 in Kansas City, Missouri. And it's interesting to point out, though, that what he did back in 1920, it was not the first Negro League. There were others in other states that were formed, but his was the most influential and had the greatest impact on baseball today, with a lot of the players coming out of that league and going into Major League Baseball later on. So with that, I'm curious, because there were other teams in other leagues, do we have anyone here in the audience today who had a family member or a loved one or someone they care about who played in other leagues or even in the Negro Leagues? Great. Just a few, okay. Well, so there's a saying in the Native American community that the honor of one is the honor of all. So even though we'll be talking about Rube Foster and other well-known players, by celebrating the Negro League history, we'll be honoring those who maybe aren't as well-known or celebrated as well. So with that, I've been researching Negro League's history since about the 1990s. And my first publication was in the Negro League journal called Blackball. And in that, I wrote about Biz Mackey. I grew up in Texas, and I'm fascinated with Negro League Texas history. Biz Mackey never made it to the big leagues, but he did have a big impact as a mentor for players like Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb, Larry Doby, and Monty Irvin. And he also had a very important role in touring Asia in 1927 and 1932. He was featured in the book that I wrote, Gentle Black Giants. So I did not know it at the time when I wrote this in 2008, but I also included a player named Bob Bailey. And Bob Bailey was a ball player who played with the Fort Worth Panthers and the Dallas Black Giants, and was once a teammate of Mackey's. And what I didn't know at the time is that this is the uncle of my mother-in-law, Dorothy Newman, my wife's mother, Kyra. So Dorothy was raised in Dallas, Texas, and before she passed away here in Chandler, Arizona, she asked me to do research on her Uncle Bob and share his story because, according to her, he was a good ball player and a good man. But unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of history about ball players who played in those leagues at that time. But unlike her classmate, this gentleman here, Ernie Banks, went to Booker T. Washington in Dallas. So his career was well documented. So again, what I'll do here today is honor ball players like Uncle Bob who didn't receive the recognition that they deserved while they were alive. And with that note, I will go back to Arizona, 1890, and share with you the history of black baseball here in Arizona. And I should point out that there will be a quiz later. If you're attending the April 15th Diamondbacks game for Jackie Robinson Day, a lot of the information we're going to be sharing with you will be used as trivia during the ball game. We're currently working with them to weave that information in. And I know there's a lot of historians here in the room today, so if we get anything wrong, let's talk on the side and we'll correct it before we get it out there in with the Diamondbacks. All right. And I should also share with you that because we're talking about a period back in the 1890s, it's very difficult to find images. So for the purpose of visual storytelling, I did find a few images of that era. I put a little R in the corner because it's a replica or a recreation. It's not the actual people that I'm talking about. So for historical accuracy, I just wanted to point that out. All right. So with that, African Americans first arrived in Arizona in the late 1860s, and men like William P. Crump of West Virginia, there we are, Richard Rosser of Georgia, and Frank Shirley of Tennessee arrived in the 1870s to become prominent leaders in the Phoenix black community. But they were not the first to bring baseball to Arizona. It was the Buffalo Soldiers down near the border, near Mexico. And here we found July 4th, 1892. We have the 25th Infantry of Fort Huachuca playing against the Colored Nine from Bisbee. So that's as early as we can find black baseball here in Arizona. And that's this is a ball team from a military ball team from 1892. And it's fascinating that Buffalo Soldiers would be the first to introduce baseball here in Arizona, because in 1959, this guy here, Satchel Paige, played a Buffalo Soldier in a movie called The Wonderful Country with Robert Mitchum. So that's a nice little bit of trivia there. All right. But a few years later, we see Frank Shirley, who's the proprietor of the Fashion Barber Shop. He did have a baseball team. And this is a great picture from the Arizona Republic of 1894. And it turns out that the barbershop community was really the hub of black baseball here in Phoenix. So most of the barbers played baseball. And this is really fascinating here. This is 1894. We start to see some of the names of the players. Just want to point out a few. Perry Polk and J.W. Bolton. Their names will become pretty important in the baseball community. This is basically a team from the 1890s. And here we have the first colored baseball league being organized in Phoenix in 1897. So this is 23 years before Rube Foster did what he did in Kansas City. But we have Perry Polk as the captain and J.W. Bolton. And both of them were barbers who had their own shop at the Adams shaving parlor at the Adams Hotel. And this is a really cool highlight that I wish I could see on ESPN. But this is the Fashion Barbershop team where they're challenging white clubs in Phoenix. And the purse is 2 kegs of beer. 1 keg would be used during the game, and they put it on third base. And if you reach third base, you got the drink. So it's pretty cool that was a part of the ball playing. All right. But the games weren't just integrated as well. As far back as 1899, you see an integrated team out of the Tempe area called the Tempe Crimson Rims, and that's tied in with a bicycle shop in Tempe. So we're moving into the 1900s, and at this time, the Buffalo Soldiers still play a prominent role in baseball here in Arizona. And this is a H Company from Fort Huachuca Museum. It's pretty cool to see them from the early 1900s. But we start to see an influence of Major League Baseball. We have the colored teams taking on the names of the World Series winners. And way back when, the Chicago Cubs would win the World Series in 1907, 1908, we have the colored Cubs rise here in Phoenix. So here's a few of the names of the teams: the Phoenix Colored Cubs, the Tempe Grays, and the Lehigh Indians out of Mesa. All right. So this is June 20th, 1908, and this is an emancipation game. What's really interesting about this is that the Juneteenth celebrations now start to play an important role in the Phoenix community, and also all across Arizona. So here we have teams from Bisbee and Douglas playing on June 19th to celebrate Juneteenth, which seems to suggest to me this might also be kind of a Texas influence as well. Because I know growing up in Texas, Juneteenth was a large holiday there. So in 1910, Perry Polk, the baseball leader in the community, he passes away. And what's interesting about this is that his funeral is held at the AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church. We start to see this connection between the black community, baseball, and the AME Church. And this catches my eye because in 1913, we have an all-women's baseball team that's playing in Phoenix as part of a fundraiser for the AME Church. They've been playing they're practicing for 2 months, and again, they're raising funds for the church. So it's fascinating to see that baseball has also played an important role for women of color here in Arizona as well. Okay. With that, I wanted to point out an important location for the baseball fields. East Lake Park is where they play most of their games. You'll see from this map, we are down in the bottom left, and it's just about a little over a mile away from here. You have to go past Chase Field, and you come across a part of town, which I did not know was called as the Booker T. Washington section of town. And that's really interesting because I then found that Booker T. Washington did come to Phoenix in 1911, and he participated in emancipation celebrations as well. But this is around September 22nd, when Lincoln actually did write the Emancipation. You can see that he participated in 3 days, and it included a baseball game. So how fascinating is that to envision Booker T. Washington over at East Lake Park watching the colored Cubs lose to the Maroons? I think it's 8-5. So Booker T. Washington is very impressed with his visit to Phoenix. He's very impressed with the racial diversity here in Phoenix. Because basically people are coming from everywhere. And of his opinion, he says that, I would not have people believe that there is no racial prejudice in Arizona as elsewhere in this country, but as yet such prejudice as exists has not fixed itself in institutions. And the result is that black men, yellow men, and red men have in Arizona an opportunity which, if they use it properly, will keep that state a free country in the broadest sense of the word for all time to come. So Booker T. Washington, again, is very impressed with the community here in Phoenix and the racial diversity. All right. Which leads to 1919, down in near Fort Huachuca, actually Nogales, Arizona. And we have the 25th Infantry Records, which is really one of the top teams at that time. They had just come over from Hawaii. They were asked to relocate to protect the border around 1918. And in 1919, November, future Hall of Famer Casey Stengel, manager of the New York Yankees, is playing with a team called the Stengel All-Stars out of Kansas City. And he schedules 5 games against the 25th Infantry. He's very impressed with this ball player down here, Walter Dobie Moore. Dobie Moore hits 2 home runs, just really impressive at third base. So legend has it that Casey Stengel goes back to Kansas City, and he recommends to J.L. Wilkinson, who is forming a team called the Kansas City Monarchs for Rube Foster's new team, that there's some great ball players down in Arizona, and you should go recruit them. Actually, J.L. Wilkinson did know Bullet Rogan from a previous relationship, but it's interesting to note that 3 ball players from Arizona make up the core nucleus for the Kansas City Monarchs in 1920. So this is Robert Fagan down in here. He leaves the team, he goes to California. He's going to play an important role, which I'll talk about shortly. But 2 more players join, Oscar Heavy Johnson, catcher, and Lem Hawkins, They joined the team, I think 21, 22. And by 1924, the Kansas City Monarchs win the first Negro League World Series, and you have 4 of the 9 starters from Arizona, which is really impressive. Which leads us to the 1920s in this building right here. 1926, the Phoenix Union Colored High School, the school mascot, they're the Monarchs. Now, I don't know if there's a strong connection or a proven connection between the baseball team winning the World Series, but we're going to look into that and let you know in more of the research. So this is the 25th Infantry. They're still a strong team. They're playing in Phoenix and Tucson, traveling throughout the state. What's really interesting, though, is we see Burt Golston, African-American umpire, in an all-white league. And this is the first time in the United States that we have an African-American umpire in an all-white league. So I'm surprised that this story doesn't get more attention, because it's quite a milestone. Burt Golston would go on and be an umpire in the Negro Leagues as well. So I just wanted to point this out. This is another Juneteenth game from 1920. This gentleman down here is William P. Crump. This would be the great-grandfather of Princess Crump. And again, he is the community leader, and he delivers a speech at the time about the League of Nations, and how this is post-World War I, and we're investing all this time, energy, and money to rebuild other nations and establish democracy and civil rights for individuals around the world, but we're failing to do that for our citizens of color here in the United States. So a really important voice at the time. And then down here, you see the Red Sox beat the Cubs, which were the 2 other teams during that game as well. So there were other individuals in the civil rights movement speaking about the rights of others. And this is where I'd like to segue and point out the connection between the Japanese American community and African Americans. So W.E.B. Du Bois says at the time, the fight of the Japanese for equal rights is similar to the fight the Negroes are making for their rights. Educated people of all races recognize that the color line is artificial. So there is a color line being drawn against players of Asian ancestry as well. Not many people know about that, but that is occurring, especially out in California. And this gentleman here is the father of Japanese American baseball, Kenichi Sugimura, and he develops really good relationships with African American ball players in California, which leads to the first tour of an African American team over in Asia. So Sugimura has his tour lined up in 1926, and he encourages his manager, Lon Goodman, to take this team as well. At the time, they were called the LA White Sox. They changed their name to the Philadelphia Royal Giants, and Robert Fagan, who had joined the Kansas City Monarchs earlier, is now a part of this team. It's pretty cool. We have a replica jersey in the exhibit that you can see later, which was worn by the San Francisco Giants in 2008. So, but they did honor the Philadelphia Royal Giants. There's Robert Fagan being picked up by Biz Mackey, because Mackey's big and strong, and he could do that. And then in 1933, we have Bullet Joe Rogan participating in the tour as well. So it's cool to see that we have those Arizona connections with these tours. Which leads us to the 1930s. And most everything in American life was impacted by the Great Depression, and baseball was no exception. So in Wichita, Kansas, the National Baseball Congress establishes a semi-pro baseball tournament, if you will, a World Series. And in 1935, the top team in Arizona was the Yuma Cubs. The Yuma Cubs, along with every other team that went to Wichita, Kansas, got their butts whooped by the 1935 Bismarck Churchills, who had recruited Satchel Paige and some of his other Negro League teammates. So Mr. Churchill was smart. He knew that if he was going to win this tournament, he needed somebody like Satchel on his team. So as the old saying goes, if you can't beat him, join him. So the Yuma Cubs hired Satchel Paige to pitch for them in February of 1936. So it's pretty cool to see that Satchel Paige is pitching for an Arizona team. So in 1936, the Phoenix Black Broncos do win the state championship and represent Arizona in Wichita. And the Arizona Gleam is the top black newspaper at that time. There's no team picture that I could find of the Black Broncos, but we could piece the team together through the box scores. Batting second and managing the team and playing right field is Burleigh Rideau. I would imagine that's a Cajun name. And he's a contractor in the area, and he organizes this team. Batting eighth is Joe Island. Joe Island is a graduate of Carver High School, and in 1937, he goes on to become the first African-American ball player at Arizona State. In 1938, he joins the Phoenix Police Department and has a long, decorated career as a police officer. But the real star of the 1936 Black Broncos was John Ford Smith. There we are.